by far one of the worst experiences in the first world. And I know there's lots of problems, but I'm just saying first world problems, one of the worst experiences that I have in my regular walking around life is this. I call a company or an organization, someone that I bought something from, or some kind of business is taking place, or I've got a question about possibly buying something or engaging or taking a flight or fill in the blank, whatever it might be. But I call these companies and they pick up the phone and they put me on hold. Because I've arranged my schedule in my mind where I have time to make this phone call and to deal with this issue. And I assume that they have people sitting there waiting there doing nothing else but waiting on me to call so that they can actually answer my question when they pick up the phone. But instead they don't. They don't have people sitting around waiting for me to call. And so what happens, I call and immediately they put me on hold. Now there's a little bit in me that's just like authority-ism, something like that, where I just don't like to be told what to do. So I enjoy when someone asks me, hey, do you mind if we put you on a brief hold? I know the answer has to be yes because they're gonna do it either way. And in that moment, I'm like, you know what? They've given me a say in what's gonna happen. And so yeah, no problem, put me on hold. But when they just pick up and say, hold please, and put the phone back down, no sir, you don't tell me what to do. I'm calling you, you don't put me on hold. It aggravates me. Now to help solve that, they have now hold music. And so to kind of de-escalate the people like me, it's like, hey, listen to some nice little elevator music. And so all of a sudden I'm on my phone and I'm just kind of waltzing through wherever I'm waltzing. I don't know if that's a waltz, but you know what I'm saying? And that doesn't work though. But they realize that we can't just play this lame music. And so now they take it up another level. What do they do now? You get to choose your music. It's like, hey, if you want to listen to some Leonard Skinner, press 1. You want to listen to some elevator music, press 2. You want to listen to Fill in the Blank, press 3. And that makes you feel good. That's all right. But even it goes so far. I'll tell you the greatest invention of the last couple of years, at least that I've been aware of it, is now you get to tell them when they put you on hold, I'm gonna hang this thing up and my phone will call me back when they pick up the phone. You know what I'm talking about? Anybody experienced that yet? It is incredible. The problem with it is I forget why I was on hold. Like I've been on hold, I've now hung up the phone for 20 minutes and I get this random number calling me and I'm like, I'm not answering that. Why would I answer that? It's a random number calling. I forgot they were supposed to be calling me back. We start the process all over again. I would imagine that there's some of you in the room that when you pray to God, that's what it feels like. That you understand prayer is my thoughts, my words to God, but it feels like every time I pray to him, he just puts me on hold. And he doesn't even offer hold music. It's just silence. Just quiet. Isn't that how prayer works? We reach out, we take some initiative, we share something with God, and it feels like the celestial sky is just saying, take a number, your call or your prayer will be answered in the order it was received. Ingredient number 2, prayer. It sounds so simple. I mean, if you're here last week and you hear ingredient number 1 and we lay that out, you're like, I was thinking you were going to give us a little more gold there. That seems a little obvious. Let me tell you something. Following Jesus actually isn't all that complicated. It's hard. It's hard to do day in, day out, but it's not complicated, people. Like he didn't make it to where you got to be a rocket scientist to figure out how do I follow Jesus. And over including last week, it's 7 weeks of finding, hey, what does the Bible say are the ingredients for our life that would help us create a life or cook up a life where we were fully satisfied in Jesus. Prayer, ingredient number 2. Now, when we think about prayer, we have to go back and let's spend a little bit of time and ask the question, where do we even get the idea of prayer from? Before Jesus shows up, the Jewish people had a lot of prayers that were recorded. We know this book or this piece of a book that we see today as the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, there are prayers for all kind of things recorded. In fact, we put a list together of all the categories of prayer, and we're going to throw it up on the screen. As Jesus was gathering people, to follow him, they had an incredible record of what it looked like to pray. I mean, look at all these things. Now, if you're thinking, hey, I can't read them, it's too small, that was the point. That was the idea, was we wanted to get it all onto one screen as best we could. So as you can see, these are not the individual prayers. They're just categories that prayers kind of fit in. But look at them. Prayers for unity among God's people. Prayers for rain and drought. For rescue from traps and ambush. Guidance for decisions. Desire for God's glory to be known. Help with fear, victory in battle. Prayers just for his people. Direction for travel and next steps. Daily needs and sustenance. So when Jesus shows up and starts bringing people to himself, there's already this record. There's this example of what prayer is. And prayer for the Jewish people throughout their history, it's both personal and it's for others. Sometimes it's something they're praying on behalf of themselves. Sometimes they're praying on behalf of someone else that maybe didn't think to pray or maybe is praying, but they want to join them in praying for something specific. And so there's a really good understanding of how prayer works. That wasn't the issue. Prayer has so many examples for us even today. But it wasn't just that people would pray when something was happening. Prayer for the Jewish people, as Jesus was drawing people to himself, prayer was also structured. So yeah, for sure, sometimes circumstances dictated a prayer happen. But even more than the circumstances dictating that a prayer happen, there was structure to their lives that incorporated regular prayer. In fact, there was a very specific prayer that would be prayed morning and night by all devout Jewish families. It's called the Shema. And the Shema is pretty lengthy. It's 3 different passages. But most families, even today, will typically not do the full version. They'll do an abbreviated version. And it comes from the book of Deuteronomy. I'll read to you just the first part of the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Now, this was a prayer prayed in the morning and in the evening. Same prayer. Now, when we look at that prayer, honestly, it doesn't feel like something we would pray. It's like, well, hold on. Are we praying to God or are we praying to ourselves? Because the first letters or the first words is, Hear, O Israel. I thought the whole idea was, no, hear, O God. I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to me and my friends and my family. I'm talking to you. So if anyone needs to hear anything, when I'm praying, it's God needs to hear it. But for some reason, this prayer spoken morning and night begins with, Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. The prayer begins, Hear, O Israel. Now, the reason for this, it comes down to what words mean. The prayer is given its title, the Shema, from the first word in the prayer, hear, or the English word, hear. Now, that hear in Hebrew, it has more than just maybe what we would think the word hear carries. So when we say, hey, listen to me, right? I want to make sure you can hear what I'm saying. For instance, we still don't have the acoustic treatment in this room, so on the fringes, it's kind of hard to hear sometimes, right? It's still just sitting out there, and actually it's in Florida. It was in Virginia, now it's in Florida. It'll be here eventually. So when we say, hey, can you hear me? It's like, okay, can the sound waves reach my ears? can they then go to my brain, and can my brain process the words that are coming out of your mouth? You know what I'm saying? Like, anybody understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? You know what I'm talking about? Like, that's the hear thing. But in Hebrew, that word hear, shema, doesn't just mean hear the sound waves, understand the words coming out of my mouth. No, the word hear means to actually believe and adopt and live what you're saying. So it's not just that I want to hear it, I want to be it. And so when Israel is led in this prayer, when Jewish folks are led in this prayer and they hear that phrase, "Hear, O Israel," Shema, when they hear that phrase, they know, I'm telling myself what I'm about to say, I believe. It's not just that I can hear it and understand the words and cognitively understand it. It's that this is who I am. And so when we read this prayer, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," they're saying, not only do I hear it, I'm telling you, this is who I am. Morning and night, listen, this is who I am. The Lord's our God, the Lord is one. The Lord is one is a direct pushback on the culture that this gets written in. The culture of the Jewish people, as Deuteronomy is written, it sits in polytheism. So many gods. They had a God for everything. A God for the rain, a God for harvest, a God for fertility, God for love and money and everything you think of. Like, there was gods. Everywhere you turn, there was gods. And so the people of Israel are set apart as something distinct from the rest of the world. And in that distinction is, we're not worshiping a bunch of gods. It's just one. And so when they say Shema, I want to hear what I'm saying because I believe what I'm saying. I'm living what I'm saying. I've got one God, and I am praying to him, talking to him right now, but I am starting my prayer, reminding myself I am not saying empty words. These words mean something to me because there is one God. He is my Lord. Love the Lord your God is a part of this prayer. In English, love here is in Hebrew, the word love here is ahava. Ahava is not the love that we think of in terms of like a warm, fuzzy, tingling sensation. The word love here in Hebrew has a more depth to it. Biblical love is about action. You don't ahava someone and just admire them from a distance. When you ahava someone, then you engage with everything that you are. So when it says love the Lord God, and then it gives you this details of how we're going to do that with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. You could not ahava someone without your heart and soul and strength. You couldn't do that. You leave any of those out and you are falling short of what ahava. You got to get another word. Come up with another version of love. I really like him a lot. Something like that. You got to fill it in. But if you're going to ahava the Lord, it requires all those things. This was their prayer together. There's one God. He's our God. And we're going to love him with everything we are. And those are not just words. Those are words that when I hear them, I believe them. Those words are who I am. And so morning and night, the people of God started their day and closed their day. Shema. Hear, O Israel. So when Jesus shows up, generations later, there's this huge list of precedent of what's prayed for, and there's some structure to prayer that kind of revolves around the truest form and understanding of who God is and who the people of God ought to be because of who God is. And so both of those types of prayers still exist when Jesus comes onto the scene. However, when Jesus comes onto the scene, there are some issues that have taken place with prayer. And there are issues that Jesus wants to confront about prayer. He says this, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. I just want to stop there for a second. He said, look, here's the deal. For some reason, we have taken the precedent of the Old Testament and all of those lists of prayers. We've taken the precedent that we now have from Deuteronomy and the other two passages that create the entirety of the Shema, that we say as a family and as individuals in collaboration with everyone in the Jewish community, morning and night. We've taken that, and people have started to abuse prayer. Like they're using it for their own selfish gain. And not selfish gain in terms of I pray for things for God to do for me personally. They're praying, and while it looks like they're talking to God, they're really just talking for people. He says they go to the most public places. They go to the most public places so that people see them praying. They're like, hey, maybe I can get a little leg up on my status if people see how spiritual I am. Verse 6, but when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like the pagans, for they think they will be heard because of the many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. And so Jesus comes right out and says, look, you've got generations of prayer habits. However, there's a little dysfunction in your prayer life. And that dysfunction I want to call out. And so he just very specifically gives them an instruction. Do not pray to be seen. There's a motive problem there. There's a heart issue there. Jesus describes people who chose the most visible spots so that everyone would know just how spiritual they are. And the truth is, when the audience that you're praying for is people, the reward is also people. But he follows that up, that idea of do not pray to be seen, with an encouragement to pray in secret. He says, yes, I want you to pray in secret. Now, that's a big change. I was like, all right, so go in our room, close the door, do pray in secret. And your Father who is unseen, when he sees what you have done, will reward you. Now, this is not a don't ever pray in public encouragement. This encouragement is simply saying you need to make your private life match your public life. In other words, if the only time you pray is when other people can hear you, that's probably a warning sign that something's off. Think about it. Just take inventory for a second. If the only times you pray is when other people are around, there's probably a disconnect on what prayer is actually supposed to be. It's not that prayer can't happen in public. Prayer should happen in public places. It makes sense for prayer to happen in public places. But if that's the only kind of prayer that's happening in your life, something's off. Now, this is not meant to create shame. This is meant for us to admit freely, I've got something to work on, and I've just identified it. That's a great place to be. I don't know if any of you showed up thinking you were just like Jesus today, but if you did, newsflash, that's not true, right? I mean, the truth is, that's a great place to be for us to say, hey, I've got something to work on. Like there's something in my life that I could put some attention into. I love that it's just become that simple. I didn't have to labor over it. I can just freely take inventory right now of how did I pray this past week? I prayed at dinner. I prayed at dinner a few times. Okay, I just prayed at dinner with everybody else. You see, the thing is, I don't think many of you have the issue of like standing up in here, like while everybody's kind of coming in or getting ready to go out. I don't really see a bunch of you like standing up and just screaming at the top of your lungs prayers to God so that people can be like, oh, they're spiritual. Wow. You know, they're getting the service started a little early today, you know what I'm saying? Or, oh, they're not ready to be done, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't see you doing that, feeling like, hey, this is a show thing, right? I think probably the most applicable piece for us when we're thinking about, hey, what is Jesus trying to tell us in our prayer life, is that reality when the truth is there's so many of us that probably the only prayer we have is before we eat. And that's it. And it's in this moment we get to realize maybe we're missing something. Maybe we're missing out because there are so many things on that list that the first people who prayed would pray for that's not on my list. My list is just food. I haven't prayed for anything else. And maybe you're saying, well, it's because God puts me on hold every time. And that's what it feels like. Every time I pray for something, it just feels like silence, like you didn't even pick up the phone. Okay. Let's stay in that. Let's push on that a little bit. Let's see what happens when that stays in the forefront of your mind as we continue to walk through this and see what Jesus has to say about it. The last thing that Jesus kind of gets on him about when he says, hey, do not pray to be seen, but do pray in secret. The third thing is, hey, don't just say a bunch of words. Like, he says, don't keep on babbling like the pagans do. And the visual I want you to have for this is, you know the person, you've probably seen them in the movies, or maybe some of you have been to Vegas and walked through the casino, and you see the person that's there all day just pumping nickels or dimes or quarters or whatever it is in the slot machine, and they're the same one. Like you go away and you come back, and you went out to see a show or whatever, and you come back, or whatever, or maybe the video or the movie you're watching, scenes for, and it's the same person in the same spot, just pumping nickels or quarters or whatever the thing takes, you know what I'm saying? And they're just pumping it, and they're thinking in their mind, if I just do it enough times and pull the lever enough times, eventually this machine will give a jackpot. And if I give up too soon, somebody else is going to get the jackpot. And so I'm just going to continue to pray to God like that. I'm just going to keep pumping him full of my words, and eventually I'm going to pull a jackpot. And Jesus is saying, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. In fact, if that's what you're thinking, hey, let me just sit in front of God over and over again and use as many words as I possibly can to communicate to him what I need in this moment, there's a really good chance he'll say yes. And Jesus is saying no. And for this one reason, before you even started to pray, God already knew you needed it. He already knew what you were lacking. And so you bringing it to him with a million different versions and 70 different syllable or 70 different thesaurus words that mean the same thing, synonyms, is that, look, that's not going to help you at all. Which then makes me think, well, then, goodness, what is prayer for if he already knows it? Then why is prayer important at all? Maybe when the Jewish people were taught to pray, there's something to it in the Shema. Hear, O Israel. Before they started praying anything, they said something out loud to themselves. This is who God is. This is what I believe. This is who I am. This is who I'll be. And then they begin to go into prayers and requests when you continue to read the Shema. Maybe there's a clue there in what prayer is really supposed to be. That it might be just as much a reminder to us of who we're talking to and who we ought to be as it is a reminder to him, by the way, I have a need. Jesus isn't attacking prayer traditions, but he is attacking what people like you and I sometimes do to really good traditions, to really good teachings, where we take it and we squeeze it to get the most out of it for ourselves. Before you know it, we're praying out loud, not to talk to God, but so that other people will talk good about us. Jesus prayed. Jesus would often withdraw and pray. Sometimes Jesus would pray in front of other people. There's just one particular moment that I find pretty intriguing. We find it written by the physician, the doctor, the historian named Luke. And Luke says this: one day Jesus was praying in a certain place. When he finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray, just as John taught his disciples." So John was the guy who was before Jesus. He kind of prepared the way for Jesus. Before Jesus had anyone follow him, John had people following himself as they prepared the way for Jesus to show up. And so one of his disciples just says, hey, John taught his disciples, will you teach us to pray? Now that's interesting to me because the people who are asking Jesus to teach them to pray already knew how to pray. Like they were devout Jewish individuals that would say the Shema morning and evening, that they went to tabernacle, they went to temple, that they were good Torah and temple Jewish folks. And so when they look at Jesus, they teach us to pray. That seems strange to me. Unless it's because when they see Jesus pray, they look at him while he's praying and they think, that's different than what we do. There's something unique about what's happening when Jesus is praying that's different than when you and I pray. And so they simply ask him, will you teach us to do what you're doing? Because what you're doing is not what we do. Like what you're doing feels different. Maybe it looks different. Maybe it even sounds a little different. They're looking at Jesus pray and they're just like, I want that, but I don't even know how to do what you just did. There's a couple of times that Jesus begins to teach prayer. And in both of them, he gives us pieces of what we know today as the Lord's Prayer. Maybe you know it. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us today our daily bread. And forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So Jesus, when asked to teach them to pray, begins to tell them the beginning of that prayer. And that brings me to a place that says, what is so different about what we know today as the Lord's Prayer and the Shema that they would have been so familiar with? Morning and night, they were praying that same prayer. But for some reason, they were like, teach us to do what you're doing. And Jesus' response to saying, hey, I'll teach you how to do what I do. Let me teach you this prayer. And he teaches them the beginning of the Lord's Prayer. But when I listen to the Lord's Prayer, I actually hear pieces of the Shema in it. Let me read you the Shema again. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And if you keep reading, there's so many other pieces. And you're like, hold on, none of those words were really in the Lord's Prayer. Yeah, but the sentiment was. In the Lord's Prayer, he says, and yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, right? Or on earth as it is in heaven. Like that idea of your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What do you think they're meaning in the Shema when they say, you're my Lord, one God, and everything I have belongs to you? They're saying, whatever you want, that's what I want in my life. Hear, O Israel, Shema, O Israel, listen and believe and live what we're about to say. Everything I am is about you as Lord because you are the one God. And when Jesus teaches us to pray, he simply says, on earth as it is in heaven, your will be done in everything. It's just a different way to say it. It feels a little more personal, but it still puts God in the very same place, just one. Hallowed be your name. Your kingdom, no one else's kingdom, just your kingdom. You see, what his disciples saw when Jesus prayed, it wasn't that he had fancy words or that he had this new prayer that was groundbreaking and going to break the mold of prayer. No, what they saw when they saw Jesus praying was they saw what it looks like for a son to talk to a father that listens. And they realized that's what we're missing. They realized that they had the awe of God figured out, the respect and the reverence of God figured out. But what they saw in the way Jesus prayed was a lack of real relationship, which to their credit wasn't really possible because of the sin barrier and the way atonement works. There were things in the way, but Jesus shows up to say, hey, I want to bring through the cross and the resurrection, I'm going to bring the two parties back to where they can be in right relationship together. So when the disciples saw Jesus pray, they were like, there's no doubt in my mind that the guy on the other end is hanging on every word. We want that. The truth is, they saw that prayer is relational, that prayer is connection to heaven, that prayer lets us taste a bit of heaven, and that prayer ushers heaven into our everyday life. Jesus wasn't the only one that gave instruction around prayer, though. There's a church planter named Paul. And Paul is writing to a young church, and he writes what is known today in Christian or church circles as a pretty famous passage when it comes to prayer as a whole. We find it in the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. I'll read it to you. He says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And so Paul is talking to this young church, and he's like, listen, there are so many things going on in your life. Are you talking to God about them? Like there's a lot of things that are creating anxiety in your life. Are you having any discussion with God at all about what's taking place in your life? Have you brought those things to him? And he's encouraging me. He's like, hey, everything, in all situations, he says, in every situation. So not just a big crisis, but small problems as well. Good opportunities, once in a lifetime moments. He said, hey, bring it all to God. He wants to hear about all of it. Sometimes we use prayer, or at least in our mind, we think prayer is going to work like Regis Philbin, and he gives us a call a friend opportunity when we get stuck. We use the phone a friend deal, and then he puts us on hold again, take a number, get to you in the order your call is received. And Paul's trying to say, hey, let's not wait until that thing happens. Can you start to interact and have conversation before something really difficult takes place in your life? In every situation, would you take it to God? He encourages them to pray and to petition, to be specific about their ask. He asks that you would do it with thanksgiving, which that becomes the default if we shema. If we actually listen to understand and believe, in that moment as we are listening to say, hey, this is who I am, this is what we believe, I'm going to shema what I'm going to pray towards God, I'm going to live it. In that moment, as that is taking place, he's saying, hey, thanksgiving should be the outcome because we're admitting, even though our circumstances are really difficult right now, I still do have direct line access to the creator of the world. And that he does want to listen, that he is listening to what's taking place. And because of that fact alone, I can engage with gratitude. That there could be some thanksgiving that sits in my soul because I'm having a conversation that's being listened to by God himself, even though my circumstances are difficult, that I'm praying about. Paul just tells them, present your requests to God. He's not trying to be poetic with these prayers. He's saying these prayers can simply be practical. He's saying, would you just turn your vague anxiety and overwhelmed emotions into a very specific request? I would imagine there's many of us that struggle with prayer because we're not sure what to say. And maybe when you think through how you learn to pray, maybe you start racing, or your mind starts racing right now, and you're thinking back to, who taught me to pray? Like, did anyone ever sit me down and say, hey, this is how prayer works? Or did you just happen to read a couple of passages that included pieces of the Lord's Prayer? Is that how you learn to pray? My guess is that you learn to pray by listening to someone else pray out loud. And maybe that is what's intimidated you in terms of your own prayer life, because you're like, I don't even know those words they were using when they were praying. In fact, the people that I know that prayed, it's like they spoke a different language when they were praying. Like it was English, like I can understand it, and I honestly probably phonetically spell what they were saying, but they don't talk like that when they're talking to anybody else. When they pray, all of a sudden it gets formal, and there's big words, and it feels all kind of stuff. Like in those moments, and you're like, hey, if that's what prayer is, I can't do that. I can't remember half those words they said. How do you pray? Let's just say you wanted to pray this week. Would you even know where to start? Maybe you feel guilty because you're being honest. The only time you have prayed is for your food. And the only reason you did pray is because everybody thought you were supposed to. And so since you're supposed to pray for your food, that's what you did. It wasn't because you actually shema, that you listen and believe and embody what you just said. It was just, well, this is what we do when we sit down. Sometimes we even hold hands and pray. I'll be honest, it's pretty easy to get pretty casual about our prayer. But let me help you with a few things that maybe you're walking through and you're just not sure how to even pray about it. Let's start with money. Let's say money is tight and it's difficult, and like it's just one of those things where you're not sure how you're going to make it this year. Maybe you just lost your job or found out things are going to slow, or fill in the blank. I think our default would be to go to God and say, hey, I need more money. Can you figure this out? And that might be why it feels like we were put on hold, or that he told us to take a number. Instead, maybe pray this prayer. God, would you give me some wisdom and a plan for the finances that I do have and how to survive when I don't? Now, I realize that includes you having to do some work. You're like, no, I was really hoping I would call God and he would hit a button and I would be fixed. Like, isn't that what prayer is supposed to be? But again, if we think back to the way Jesus prayed, it was more about relationship than it was, let me put a nickel in the slot machine and pull the lever and see if I get a jackpot. Maybe you've got some marriage anxiety and things are falling apart and you've been praying, God, don't let her leave. Or God, make him fill in the blank. Maybe your prayer this week could be, God, help me speak with humility and be a better listener. Maybe you've got some kid anxiety. Like the things they're getting into or the conversations they're having or the conversations you need to have with them are just too much too soon. Your prayer could be, God, give me patience today and give me some courage for the hard conversations. Or maybe you've been a failure lately. Maybe every time you pick up the ball, you pass it to the other team. Or you kick it out of bounds. You just keep dropping things over and over again. Maybe your prayer this week could be, God, help me learn to get back up and to believe that you still use imperfect people. Or maybe you are just overwhelmed at work. Like there's just so much. Maybe your prayer could be, God, give me strength for today's assignments and some humility to ask for help. Paul is writing these instructions about prayer as a church leader to church people, to real people like you and me, in real stress. And he's not saying stop feeling. He's not saying don't be anxious about these things. If you pray, your anxiety will just fade away. He's not saying anything like that. What he is saying is, I want to give you some clarity on what prayer really is. He said, I want you to take everything to God, not just the big things, but the small things and the in-between things, the good things, the bad things, the crisis things, the celebration things. Take it all to him. Don't stop feeling. This is not going to fix or cure your anxiety just because you said it out loud to God. That's not it. However, he is saying this. You don't have to carry anything we just talked about alone anymore. You're not by yourself. In fact, God is anti-alone. He's anti-loneliness. The enemy, Satan, he is pro-alone. He is pro-lonely. That's his favorite spot for you to be. Nobody knows me. No one cares about me. No one even values me. I'm all by myself. He loves when you're in that spot. That's the definition of hopelessness. God is the opposite of that. God is, you have worth. I know you. And you can pick up the prayer phone and talk to me anytime you want about the littlest thing or the biggest thing or everything in between. You can pray to me. I mean, God's been saying this since the beginning. In Genesis 2:18, he looks at Adam and says, it is not good for you to be alone. We fast forward just a little bit, and the Christmas promise, the word Emmanuel, the name for Jesus, it means God with us. And then when Jesus is done with his time here on earth post-resurrection, he looks at all of his followers and simply says this, know this, I'm going to be with you to the very end of the age. In other words, you can't outlive the length of time I've made a promise to be with you. You can't outlive it. It doesn't matter how old you get or how long you go into the future. I still will be there. And so prayer is part of God keeping his promise that you are never alone. So when you start asking the question, how do I pray, or why do I pray, or should I pray more? The answer is yes, simply for that reason. It's to remind you, Shema, I'm not in this all by myself. I'm not in this all by myself. I am not alone. And prayer is the everyday reminder of that. It's the everyday reminder of who we are and who God is. And the reality is, we are not in this all by ourselves. So how should you pray this week? How much should you pray this week? Where would you start to pray this week? I can't answer that for all of you. But I will say this. There's not a single person here in the room or watching online that God wouldn't like to hear from. The little pieces of your detailed life to the big crisis that you're facing and feel like is impossible for you to overcome. God would love to hear about it. He would love to have a relationship in prayer with you. Not just a crisis line. A just in case. Please bail me out moment. So you don't need fancy words. The truth is, you don't need fancy knowledge. The phrase we like to use here is, if you've never prayed before, or it's been a really long time since you prayed, prayer is really simple. It's just beginning to think thoughts in God's direction. And He takes care of the hard part.